Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Bridger of Worlds podcast. I am your host, Ioannis. Thank you so much for joining me. If you're on YouTube watching, thank you for tuning in. And if you're on one of the podcast platforms, thank you for tuning in as well. So the name of this podcast is called Bridger of Worlds. And really why I came up with the name of this podcast is because I love to make connections, if you haven't noticed already. So Bridging Worlds is about bringing different pieces and parts together. We could say that's harmony, right? Which I talked about in the previous episode. And today is going to be basically this. I want to bring in more archetypes, more energies, and connect them to the cosmic Christ. I want to make more connections because, as we will eventually see, or maybe we've already seen and understood, that no matter what the spiritual teaching, no matter what the religious background, no matter what the esoteric schools of thought, somewhere between the lines, we can find some form of common ground. And I think that is what the foundation of spirituality is. It's about bringing together and not so much segmenting and putting things in boxes and labeling them as something different from the other thing. So the cosmic Christ, I really enjoyed recording last week's episode. And today I want to elaborate on the cosmic Christ. So last week I talked about it in connection to Dionysos and Shiva, which was 2 episodes ago. So I highly recommend touching base with last week's episode, as well as the episode before that, where I talked about the connection between Dionysos and Shiva. And today I'm going to bring in more deities to the conversation, and I'm going to connect them to the cosmic Christ. Because as I talked about, yes, we have the historical figure. We have the man that was Jesus Christ, who taught what he taught and experienced what he experienced. But what he was actually evoking, channeling, and embodying through his teachings and his experience was the cosmic Christ, was this energy of life, death, and rebirth through sacred fire, through holy fire. And as I mentioned, if we look around the globe, if we look through history and across myth and cosmology, this sacred fire is absolutely everywhere. So is life force, very many different names. And this life force symbolically is our inner fire. So also, almost forgot, I want to also bring in Eros and Logos today to the conversation. This is a big, loaded discussion. I talked about Eros in relationship to Thanatos. Eros is creation. Eros is the physical act of universal love. Everything is communing in Eros. And Thanatos serves the balance. Thanatos is death. But after that death, within death, is also life renewing, life returning. So we see that connection to cosmic Christ. And Eros has another polar opposite, and that is the Logos, which we know very well in modern day Christianity. But actually, the Logos is a Platonic school of thought. The Logos is a part of ancient Greek cosmology. It's something that Plato and his teachings came up with. It does more or less hold the same meaning as it does in the Christian teachings. In the Christian teachings, Jesus was like the Logos incarnate. So first and foremost, Logos translates to reason. And it also refers to the word. When we read the New Testament and we see the word, it actually speaks to the Logos, to the reason of creation. So this actually means that the universal manifestation of creation is informative in nature. That's why they put the word synonymous with the Logos, because this was a means to explain that actually everything is encoded within information, right? And if we look at modern day physics, quantum mechanics tells us that everything is information. There's a certain intellect, there's a certain frequency that is telling everything to be and do what it's supposed to be and doing. So from that perspective, the Logos is actually the polar opposite of Eros, because Eros is the physical act of love. Logos is the reason for creation. Everything communes in love to materially and physically manifest through Eros. We already talked about this. And the reason for existence, the reason for this creation is love. And so, Logos is the polar opposite complement to Eros. This is why I connect Eros to the cosmic Christ, to the energy of the holy fire, to sexual energy that is creative energy, that is spiritual energy. I thought about talking about the Logos in the previous episode because I did talk about Eros, but it was going to be too big of an episode. So this is why I decided to record today's episode and bring in Logos to the conversation. So now we have Logos and Eros. Eros is love. Logos is reason. We can also paint these as the feminine and masculine principles of creation in ancient Greek cosmology. Eros being feminine and Logos being masculine. So Logos is very much about like divine intellect. Remember I talked about nous in some episodes ago? So nous is actually that divine intellect in Platonic school of thought. Nous is that divine information, and Logos is the manifestation, is the will of that divine intellect. And will is very much a masculine word. It's a masculine expression. The will of the universe is the masculine, and the energy of bringing everything together in connection and in communion is the feminine principle, aka Eros. So that is connected to the cosmic Christ. All that reflects the cosmic Christ. The cosmic Christ is both Eros and Logos. Now, in modern day Christian teachings, they don't talk about Eros because, as I talked about, we had some issues with the feminine and sexuality and perceiving divine power also from the feminine aspect. So Mother Nature, the goddess, right? All these feminine archetypes, all these female goddesses throughout history, mythology, cosmology. But that does not negate the truth, right? No matter how much suppression happened, the truth is the truth. And the ultimate act and manifestation of creation is the union of the masculine and the feminine. And we see this throughout so many teachings, right? So modern day Christianity is filled with symbolism, is filled with allegories, is filled with metaphors, and I do believe it is a religion that ultimately talks about divine union. And it's the union of human being with God. So symbolically speaking, that is the union of the feminine with the masculine. The human is the aspect of matter, and God is the aspect of spirit. So the union and reunion of matter and spirit is divine union of masculine and feminine from the conventional Christian teachings. Now, of course, we have holy fire, we have the serpent in Eden, right? Like, there's a lot of symbolism within the Christian teachings that refer to a lot of the same themes and topics that other religions and esoteric schools of thought talk about, but they actually refer to sexuality, sexual energy, and obviously the Kundalini serpent in Kundalini yoga, and even the chi fire as part of the microcosmic orbit in sexual kung fu. So these are all things I talked about. I just want to refresh your memory a little bit. But I do want to bring in more deities, as I said, to the conversation in reflection to the cosmic Christ. So we do have Osiris and Ra of ancient Egypt, who were powerful deities and gods, a part of the pantheon of Egyptian gods and goddesses. And then we also have Apollo of ancient Greece. So the connection to the cosmic Christ as far as Ra and Apollo are concerned, they were both solar deities. So Jesus Christ is very much connected to the energy of the sun, because the Logos is very much connected to the sun. So before Christianity, and as part of the Platonic teachings, we have this expression called spermatikos logos, which is basically the seed pattern. That's what it means. It means the seed information. And this seed is actually a representation of the sun on the earth plane. Let me clarify a little bit what that means. So all the seeds we plant on the earth, right, they're just seeds, already hold the life catalyst of whatever is to grow from that seed. And that is because of the sun. So obviously we need the sun's rays, heat, and light to make all of the seeds grow. The plants, the flowers, everything grows because of the sun, right? The sun is our center. The sun is our reason for physical creation here on our planet. So spermatikos logos is the seed information, the seed reason, the seed pattern, or basically the reason for that specific life to manifest the way that it's supposed to. Now, Apollo as a god, he was not the god of gods like Zeus was, but he was a part of the 12 gods of Olympus. He was a son of Zeus. In Egypt, where we see Ra as the solar deity and the center of the pantheon, in ancient Greek mythology, this was Zeus. And Zeus was not a solar deity. Apollo was the solar deity and was also associated with music, prophecy, and harmony. So remember how I talked about harmony in the previous episode and how that is connected to cosmos, right? Like bringing the different pieces and different parts together to create beauty, harmony, and synergy in the universe. This is actually all associated with Apollo. This is also why he's connected to music and poetry, because to compose music and to compose poetry is very much about harmony. And this is actually what the Logos represents. The Logos is, right, we talk about the reason for creation. And when we think about creation, we think of how everything harmonizes and comes together to create a very beautiful and organized existence. And here I'm talking about the universe, right? I'm talking about universal creation. So in Apollo, we see cosmic Christ. Apollo is associated to the sun. And spermatikos logos is that life catalyst that is underneath the earth that basically brings forth all of physical life to the surface. We can connect that to cosmic Christ as well, because Jesus Christ was also channeling and saying that he is everywhere. And if we obviously take all of the symbolism into account within the symbolic act of sex, man releasing his seed is a symbolic expression of fire. Woman receiving the seed is a symbolic expression of water. The womb is water, is the dark water space where the seed, where the life catalyst is to enter to grow new life. Here we also see Eros. This is also an expression of Eros. So it's also an expression of Logos, because Eros and Logos are two sides of the same coin. Now, in Egypt, Ra was the center of the pantheon. Ra was one of the main gods and one of the first gods of Egypt, and he's very much a solar deity. He is very much connected to sun worship. All the pharaohs of Egypt were perceived to be basically descendants of Ra. And Ra also traveled every night in the underworld where he battled a serpent. When Ra would descend, basically when the sun would descend for night to occur, It was said that Ra would go into the underworld and go through all sorts of trials and tribulations, including the battle with a serpent. Now, this is very symbolic because anytime we hear of a serpent battle in any type of mythology, it speaks to the raising of our sexual energy. Because archetypally speaking, the serpent represents our sexual energy. So Ra, the sun, right, the god of the sun, descending into the underworld to battle the serpent was basically to raise the fire, the sun, that heat, to come up to daylight and basically transmute sexual energy in order to become spiritual energy. Ra was a very, very prominent spiritual symbol in Egypt. And we can also see this in Apollo's myth. So Apollo is, as I said, also associated with prophecy. And we have one of the most famous temples in Delphi here in Greece that was built in honor of Apollo. And Apollo actually had to battle a python, Pythia. When we think of Python now in our modern day age, it actually comes from a Greek word. She was a Greek serpent priestess that Apollo actually slayed in order for prophecy and for the oracle to come into existence. So every time in ancient Greece they visited the temple of Delphi, Apollo actually was speaking through this priestess, Pythia. So again, this is symbolic. We slay the serpent, and all of us have this serpent within ourselves, right? The serpent of sexual energy. And as I talked about, it is not to stay in the lower centers. We are to raise the sexual energy. We are to raise the serpent. The death of the serpent does not mean its end. It means transformation. It means transmutation. It means transcendence. So very much connected to cosmic Christ. Cosmic Christ is alive in the energy and in the stories of Ra, and very much alive in the energies and stories of Apollo. And now we have, of course, Osiris. Osiris and Isis, a very prominent divine union symbol in ancient Egypt. And this is a beautiful story because it was Osiris that was dismembered by his brother Seth, who was the god of wind and chaos. And it was said that he dismembered his brother, Osiris, put all of those dismembered parts in the underworld. But then Isis, a very prominent goddess held in very much high regard in ancient Egypt, who traveled into the underworld to put Osiris back together. And she actually raised them up from the underworld. So this is very much a story where we see like the divine feminine healing and offering the transformational gestative space for the masculine. Because as I talked about in the earlier episodes, the feminine represents transformation, shifts, and cycles. She is the gestation space. She is the transformation space. So the fact that the divine feminine travels into the underworld, which is basically her domain, to put the sacred masculine back together again, Osiris, this very much represents divine union between the masculine and the feminine. And Jesus Christ, symbolically speaking, was dismembered, right? Like what he experienced through his crucifixion, all of the suffering, all of the pain, all of the anguish, and basically returned back as the resurrected one in order to ascend into heaven toward the Father and basically become the Father. Now, in the Christian teachings, we don't see an actual woman, coming into the underworld to put him back together again. This is all symbolism, right? When we're talking about mythology and when we're experiencing something within our lives, no matter what phase, no matter what is going on, we can actually touch base with all of these myths. Most likely, these myths will touch base with us to give us the medicine and the messages that we need. So again, we can very much see the energy of cosmic Christ alive in Osiris. And these are not the only ones, right? So I guess I wanted to make this episode because I really want to emphasize this notion that the cosmic Christ is an energy. And I talked a little bit about, the war between monotheism and polytheism. And I just personally don't see the reason why. In this day and age. Back then, maybe it wasn't as clear. And obviously with my Christian background, and as I said, like the conventional teachings weren't feeding me, it's very interesting to see the connections, and it's very interesting to see what is alive where and what part of the world. And I brought to the table Apollo, Osiris, and Ra, but there's so many others. And my point here is not to say that it's like all about the Christ, or that everybody needs to become Christian because the cosmic Christ is everywhere. Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Buddhism, Hinduism, all the religions, all the modern day religions are allowed to see God the way they want to see God. Even the ancient mythologies, even the ancient cosmologies, because it's all one energy, it's one God, right? And all of these pieces of history and myth basically just have put different faces and filters on this one God. This is where I'm at when it comes to, spirituality and like the modern day teachings and what everybody's trying to depict. I don't believe that any religion is wrong per se. It's just the way things are being communicated. Like, to say that this religion is right and this religion is wrong, I'm right because I'm this religion, you're wrong because you're that religion, that has absolutely nothing to do with spirituality. Nothing. That's actually segmentation, separation, the shadow, right? That is the shadow's ultimate endgame, is separation for the sake of separation and segmentation, and to basically strengthen duality. Duality is a part of life. Duality is a part of human nature. But we have to realize oneness within duality. We can't just stay within the realm of duality. And I believe that modern day religions are very much about this. Like, we have like the opposites, right? We have this religion fighting with that religion. We have that religion fighting with that religion. So we're staying in the realm of duality. Where's the oneness? That's God. That's spirituality. And to really hone in on this, what is spirituality, is basically life, death, and rebirth. And not just, at the physical level, because we see this in nature. We see this every year when autumn comes, winter, spring, summer, right? Like, that's life, death, and rebirth. But within that life, death, and rebirth is also spiritual realization. That is like spirituality in a nutshell. And that's the cosmic Christ. That's Buddha consciousness. I'm not very familiar with Buddhism, but I do know that when Buddha became enlightened, he roared. He roared like a lion when Buddha became enlightened. And Christ consciousness, which is the Logos, the reason of creation, is synonymous with Buddha consciousness. Dharma, which is a Sanskrit word for truth, is synonymous with the Logos. Purpose, right? When we have a certain purpose that we are to fulfill in our lifetimes, that is our reason, that is our Logos, and that is also our Dharma in the Eastern teachings. So this is why I've named this podcast The Bridger of Worlds. I love to make connections, to bridge worlds, to bring worlds together. That's love. That's spirituality. That is what we're here for. And yeah, we're allowed to have different opinions. It's not about everybody being the same, or individuation is very much a part of the human experience, but it is within becoming an individual and coming into our own that we actually have to contribute and come in service to the rest of humanity. It is very easy to individuate and stay in like our ego, right? Me, 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 me. No, we are to individuate. We are to realize who we are. And that might take up a lot of time and space alone, right? We might need time apart, space apart for that to happen. But ultimately, we become who we are. We become individuated to show up to the collective, to show up to humanity and offer service and contribute. Like, what do I have that nobody else has? I have to realize that. And then how can I show up and offer it? That's what it's about. So we are to be unique. We are to have our own opinions. We are to fully individuate, which translates to becoming a fully realized self in Jungian psychology. And then we are to participate and contribute within that individuation. So there's a little tangent, a little bonus tangent there, because I wasn't planning on talking about individuation, but hey, these are live transmissions. So it's funny, every time I come in front of this mic and camera, I know there's an idea of what it is I want to talk about. But it is, obviously cooking up in the ether. So I'm like, is it going to come through the way that I want to? Is it going to be a fully cooked meal? Am I just going to be throwing like sauces and spattering all over the walls? Is it going to be a mess? So there you go. That's my whole process, and having a blast, honestly, being here and talking about the things that I've been wanting to talk about for quite a while, but things were definitely cooking and things definitely needed to cook. So I'm so glad you're with me on this journey. I think I will leave it here. That's definitely enough food for thought. And I guess really the takeaway message for me, because I have struggled so much with sexuality because of porn and so on and so forth, and obviously like what all the conventional teachings were saying about sex and sexuality, that sexuality is encompassed within the cosmic Christ. Like if there's going to be a message that you're going to take away from everything, sexuality is encompassed within the cosmic Christ. Life, death, rebirth, creation, destruction, Eros, Thanatos, Eros, Logos. And then we have all these deities that really embody cosmic Christ energy. Shiva, Dionysos, Apollo, Ra, Osiris, and many, many, many more. And it's not to say that everybody needs to convert to Christianity or anything like this. It's just about making the connections, bridging worlds, and really realizing that we are not so different and separated after all. So I think this is a good point to end this episode today. So I'll be back next week with another episode. As always, every Thursday, I'm here. If you're on YouTube watching, please hit that like, subscribe button. It really, really helps me out. Also, share the content if you so feel called. If you want to connect with me, please leave a comment below on YouTube. I'm also on Threads, Instagram, and TikTok with my full name. I'm on Facebook under Bridger of Worlds. I'd love to see you over there as well. If you're on one of the podcast platforms, thank you for tuning in. As always, I think I said already that I'll be back next week, but I'll say it one more time. And please remember that you are the medicine and I am just the messenger. Thank you very much and take care.